in our recreation of these chaps that we owe them, the very least that we owe them is to be respectful enough to get the portrayal correct. So this is probably the closest you'll actually get to see Royal Flying Corps personnel, unless somebody invents a time machine and you can conveniently pop back in time 100 years to 1916 or any of the Great War years. Now, I'm going to stop talking in a minute. Mr. Creek is the man to do the talking. Besides, I'm the captain, I'm the flight commander, and he does what I ask him to do. So just stand by for a few minutes and we'll get ourselves sorted out.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, while we're settling down, just for further delectation, we have Aircraftsman Langham here, who's lovingly cradling an original 20-pound Cooper Bob. So that's a pretty unique sight in itself. It's not fused, so it won't go off. Stop.
Which is why we're still standing.
Which is why we're all still standing here. It's quite a nasty little present for some platoon of Bosch infantry somewhere. Right. Also joined by a couple of ladies there from the Royal Air Force Museum. As you will probably be aware, the First World War was a great time for ladies for the first time participating in an active military role. Not of course in combat, that would be totally wrong regardless of what they do today. We've got to have regard for the fact that ladies are different, but they played many crucial roles within the Royal Flying Corps. They did administrative work, cooking, dispatch rider duties, etc. So again, don't just talk to the chaps, I'll give you their presentation. Speak to the ladies and they will be able to thrill you with their exploits during the Great War and the vital roles they played in supporting those lucky few of us who actually had to go back and face the hut. Right, I think we're almost there. We're nearly there. Right, I'll be quiet. Over to you, Mr. Creek.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming and discussion of flying clothing. The flying clothing we're looking at today is the flying clothing of the British air services in the First World War, principally of the Royal Flying Corps, because the Royal Naval Air Service also had to wear protective warm clothing as well, but generally they did so wearing black, as that became a bit of a fashion for the Royal Navy. So generally the two organisations, the Royal Flying Corps formed in 1912, the Royal Naval Air Service splitting off from that organisation in July 1914. They were the two organisations that went to war in 1914. Before this, the days of pioneering, of daring aerial exploits, the days of those pioneers like Louis Blériot, Claude Graham-White, Frederick Handley Page, all of those people who flew before the war are recreated here at the Shuttleworth collection, and you will see some of the aircraft types that they would have flown. In those days, aircraft were only flying hundreds of feet high. For a lot of the time they were displaying to the public, they were showing off their skills. They were helping to make the public air-minded, so they were not going to be flying too high. Of course, when they wanted to carry out long-distance flights, races and so on, they would get a bit of altitude, so that if there was a problem with their aircraft, with their engine, and they had to go down in a steep glide, they had enough clearance to actually make a safe landing. That was the point. But that was as high as they needed to go, so they really didn't have to wear too much. Generally a warm coat would suffice, something like a duffel coat or something like that, a warm woolen coat, and a pair of goggles to protect their eyes from grit and dust, from insects, from the slipstream generated by that powerful propeller going into their the wind going into their eyes. And then they would wear a nice tweed cloth cap, and that would keep their head warm, but always characteristically turned back to front just because it looked good. And so that's what you tended to find in those pioneering years before 1914. But as climbing altitudes became greater, as speeds increased gradually as the months went by, the designs of the aircraft improved, you had to wrap up warmer. You were going into colder climbs. And so a leather coat, the kind of motoring coat that motor racing drivers had worn up to that point, was adopted by anyone who flew. When the First World War broke out, August 1914, the pilots who were going up to those sort of altitudes, the 5,000 and 6,000 feet altitudes, were having to wear something similar. And of course, officers and gentlemen all had to provide their own clothes. They had to go to department stores, Army and Navy and Harrods and those sort of places, and provide their own. So they had to spend a lot of money on a coat. And today you see 3 different styles of coat, all perfectly legitimate options, all privately purchased, funded from their own pockets, and all the cut, the colour, the styling, the comfort that you wanted. There was no regulation about it whatsoever, because of course what we're wearing, what you can see us wearing now, is not uniform. It is flying clothing, so it's for comfort. It's not about being inspected. So that's really it. So we've got a variety of things, such as a very glossy leather, different colours of leather, different lengths. I think my one is the longest one. All 3 coats we have here are new, but they are all perfect copies of originals held in museum collections, particularly the Royal Air Force Museum. And so they're all genuine designs to the cut and the measurements of those original examples. You have a double thickness here on the front, and you also have a lining of wool, a woolen blanket, to keep that warmth in, just right for a June day. But of course you do have to remember that down here, no matter how warm it is down here, where you're flying, probably not so much displaying today, but where you'd be operationally flying would be very high, and with every 1,000 feet the aircraft climbs, it drops a couple of degrees. So it is much colder up there, and of course you're flying at considerable speed, so you need that protection. Immediately in front of your face on most aircraft you have the engine and the propeller spinning, which generates that great big wash of cold air. So this double thickness of leather at the front, it serves its purpose. Just behind us we have a variety of flying clothing. You don't just have to wear a coat, you have to equip yourself with other things. So you have on your hands a pair of silk gloves, keeping the heat against your fingers. One of the big problems is frostbite, and of course frostbite is where your blood simply doesn't circulate around your extremities. So every opportunity you have of insulating yourself in this, you will take that. And on top of that, you would privately purchase yourself a pair of flying gauntlets. In this case, sheepskin, Astrakhan wool. Here is made in a rather unpleasant way, which I'm not going to be describing today. But this is the kind of thing made in the Middle East. And there, it covers the arm, it goes up the arm, stopping any drafts. But the leather, very often goat skin, would be supple enough for you to operate instruments, for you to fire triggers on machine guns and so on. So they've considered that as well. Other types of gloves, we've got the leather flying gloves, different options here. And over here, anyone like to guess what we're looking at just here? What kind of fur are we using there? These, by the way, these 2 Sorry?
Dog?
Dog, no. No, good. Black bear.
Black
So
bear.
this is bear skin. It's exactly the kind of thing that we might make a guardsman's hat out of. So there it is. Also, in the early days of the war, these were very popular, privately made. The idea here is, of course, you can see it, I'll pass that one round, have a look, is of course that you've got a glove, so you can use your fingers, you've got dexterity, you can do that.
Yeah.
But of course you then have, on the back, an extra mitten. And you can pin that back, and when you're extremely cold, on a long bombing raid, for example, in 1917, you can then pop that over the top of the fingers, giving yourself extra warmth. This design became universally popular with the crews that served at that period. So when the Royal Air Force was formed out of the Royal Flying Corps and the Royal Naval Air Service, the two were pushed together by Government Act in November 1970, and they were pushed together on the 1st of April 1918. And when that was happened, one of the early things that the Air Ministry did was to investigate, to research what clothing was good, what clothing worked. They interviewed the crews and they said, what do you like? And one of the things that we like those gloves, those gauntlets. So that became one of the first sealed patterns in the service. There we are. And they continued to be worn right through the 1920s. Over here, instead of a leather flying coat, we can see this all-in-one suit, just like a onesie. It's the Sidcott flying suit, designed by Australian Sydney Cotton. And he was the man who was very inventive later in the war, worked in radio. But in the First World War, was very inventive. All aircrew used to like to fiddle with their aeroplanes, tune them up, get the machine guns working properly, make sure the engine was... Because for the pilot, it was their life support system. They depended on their aircraft. And he spent a lot of time in the hangar working on his plane. His workman's overalls were very greasy, very sort of laden with oil. And they were suddenly called up to... his flight was called up to carry out some kind of emergency patrol. And he had nothing on but his workman's overalls, and he was up in the air, came down, they all came down and discussed the sort of aborted flight that they'd made, and Sydney Cotton was talking to the others. They'd all got their leather coats on, and they said, wasn't it cold up there today? And he said, funnily enough, I didn't notice it that much, and that's because he was wearing his overalls with the grease. He thought, if I can incorporate an oiled layer into an all-in-one suit, I've got the solution to the extreme cold. Because of course by 1917 they were flying at 16, 17, 18,000 feet, as opposed to the 6,000 feet that we were discussing. So he produced this suit. It had a quilted layers, it had a stuffing inside, fur around the collar, and inside, you can't see it, there would have been an oil layer, and that was a barrier against the cold. This became so popular that the suit went right on through the RAF in the 1920s and was only replaced by a zipped version in the 1930s. On our feet we wear different flying boots. The official title is full-length, thigh-length flying sheepskin flying boots. But they soon became known by a nickname. They became known by the name Fug Boots. And the official pair goes right up there. But different aircrew like different things, and they tended to cut them down to different lengths. And indeed, you can either tuck them into your suit or wear them outside. So you do what you like. You wear different patterns, different colours, different cuts, some with more leather at the foot, some with less. By the way, they're reinforced on the toe and on the heel with leather, because the sheepskin is very fragile, and after a few weeks your toes start to push their way through and make a hole, so they had to do that. That's really the reason for their appearance. Flying helmets also vary as well, fur linings of different kinds, and for the extreme cold, various ways of masking yourself up. I'm not going to be putting too hot for this today, but you can see the idea, so that when you have accompany that with a goggle mask, you have your protective goggles with rabbit fur around the outside. That goes on too. And of course when you've got that on, like that as well, with the collar up. So you've got the idea, there's no way. It's a complete protection against the cold. On various combinations where your cheeks weren't covered, they would use whale grease. And whale grease is something that in the cold sets hard, and against something warm like warm cheeks is a bit softer. But then when that cold air hits your cheeks, that hardens and forms like a shell against the cold. They did do that as well. And finally, over here, well, right from the early days, pilots had to ferry their aircraft to and from France to Britain and so on. They had to go over the Irish Sea, over the North Sea to carry out patrols. So certainly some examples right from the outset of life vests started to appear. When the Royal Flying Corps first went to France in August 1914, they were issued with rubber inner tyres from cars. And they were said, put that round your waist, wear it all the time as you're going over. And they went over to the Somme Valley, and they said, put that on, if anything happens, you'll have to blow in it. And that was all they were given. But very soon, private companies, commercial companies developed them, hot padded ones and so on. This one was perhaps the most successful design of the First World War, the Orlif Perrin, and it had in here a metal cylinder full of gas, and if you crank the handle, the gas would automatically inflate the rubber part of the belt, rather like a modern life jacket, rather like a sort of whoopee cushion type thing. It would inflate and it would keep the head above the water, so they would wear that. It's quite generous because it has to go around the flying coat, and it's got braces. And just at the top here is a self-inflation, so if you're still in the sea and it's going down, you can puff into it if you've got any energy left. But it's exactly the sort of thing that was issued in the sort of later half of the First World War. And I think that's all we've got time for. I'm quite hot now. My colleagues are quite hot too. Oh, flying goggles, different types, different patterns. Some simpler, kind of oval-shaped, teardrop-shaped windows like these. Some with a colour tint, because remember, where these people are going to be flying is above that cloud layer most of the time. Today you'll probably see them all the aircraft below the clouds, but in those days, of course, their operations required them to be up there, in amongst the sun and the clear blue sky, so you would need some protection for your eyes. Different shapes, different styles, and of course the design of this part here. This is a goggle mask which even protects your nose against the frostbite. So they thought just about everything. Also here, finally, the observer might well wear this. It's like a balaclava. This part tucks inside the flying coat and tightens up behind the, well, this one tightens up around the front. This bit covers your nose. You've got the wind shields here, deflecting the wind away from your ears. You've got some pockets for Gosport tubes for flying training if you need that. And as you can see, it would be incredibly hot for us to put that on today. But up there, when you're standing around in the rear cockpit with your machine gun in front of you, not doing a lot until you're actually attacked, this kind of helmet would be absolutely ideal. If there are any questions, I'd be very pleased to answer. Thank you very much for listening, and you can come and have a closer look at the things we're wearing very shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.